Bruce on? He can. All right, we're going to call to order the Harris Township Board of Supervisors meeting for January 25th, 2023. If you would all like to rise, and we'll do the national anthem. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now normally we have approval of the minutes, but before we get to that, we got another issue here we have to deal with tonight. We have a couple members who have 159 years between them tonight.
Mr. Wood, distinguished.
Oh, distinguished gentlemen, and I think probably 50 of those, well, probably more than that, probably 60 or 70 of those years they've been on this board. So
easy.
Hey, I'm just being nice.
Okay. He's longer than I am.
Today's Bud and Denny's birthday, so let's all wish Denny and Bud a happy birthday.
Put a cup out there. Put a money cup out there.
Bud wants a money cup.
I forgot the fireball.
I have him by a year ago.
And I don't believe we have any minutes tonight that we have to approve.
If we had a combined cake for the both of them, there would be 159 candles on it.
Well, I talked to Van Winter. He was afraid of the fire hazard if we brought it in here. So they didn't want to roll out tonight, so we didn't do it. Cake. So. All right, we have no minutes to approve tonight. So we're going to move on to citizen comments. This is a session of the meeting where any citizen would like to make a comment on something that is not on the agenda tonight is welcome to do so at this time. Please, if you step to the microphone, and let us have your name and where you're from. And please limit your comments to 5 minutes. So is there anybody that has any citizen comments? Okay, hearing none. We're going to go to new agenda items. And I'm not sure, or do we want to put that the one that we handed out with the priorities, or is that you're going to do that under COG?
That's under the COG budget
Okay.
priorities at the end.
Yeah. All right. Does anybody else have any other agenda items they would like to add? Okay. Hearing none, we're going to move on to new or township business. Okay. Tonight we are going to be talking with our ABC committees. They're going to be telling us what they did last year and what they plan on doing for this year. So first up will be the 2023 Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee work plan. And I'm not sure who's going to do it. Diane? We're going to have Diane do that. You're up.
Yes, I am. I think I know all of you, and that you know that I'm Diane Ishler, but just in case I say I'm Diane, yes, I am. And I am actually the current vice president of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. Pam Dunn is the president, but she's out of town and couldn't be here. The rest of the committee includes Diane Farr, Eve Rhodes, Jenny Evans, Susan Stead, and Becky, and I don't know how to pronounce it. DePodman. And then Bruce Lord, who represents Harris Township on the Center Region Parks and Recreation Authority. First of all, we want to thank you very much for your support so that we could provide healthy outside opportunities for the residents of Harris Township. Now, the pandemic really had an impact on what we could accomplish for the last several years. And you have both the 2022 work plan and the proposed, or what we intend to do, 2023 work plan. In 2022, we started to catch up with some of these things that because of weather or the pandemic just weren't getting finished. And so, as you could see in the 2022 work plan, we were able to put in a new playground equipment in the Nittany View Park, have the bin-o-rama installed in the Phasic Park tot lot. We also met with some of the residents near the tot lot to look at the at putting in maybe a rain garden or something, and I'll talk about that a little later. We also we finished our work on the updating of the official map. We installed new plantings on the diamond, had swings installed at Country Place, added a memorial bench in Tussipun Park, added Phasic Park project to the Eagle Scout list, and implemented a new scouting procedure. There were some planned items that we did not finish, including a possible gazebo in Harpster Park, which we kind of put on the back burner because some of the residents were not happy about having a gazebo there. And additional paths for Harpster Park, the amphitheater in Yoder Preserve, and clearing out more dead trees in Country Place. Some of the items continue to be evaluated and reviewed, including exploring the options for converting the stormwater basin in a rain garden into a rain garden in Phasic Park tot lot. Also funding to add another ADA fishing pier at Tussipun Park, as well as how the development plans can progress. Then also continue to evaluate no-mow areas. But that's kind of a kind of a shortcut for all of those things that are listed under that 2022 work plan. Do you have any questions before we go to the 2023?
No. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Well, the Harpster Park, there was some talk about putting a flagpole or something up there. Has you heard anything more about that? Harpster family was going to pay for it, or?
We were originally going to do the flagpole next to the gazebo, and then the
The
gazebo
gazebo's
became
not
such a
that.
hot button issue that we put that on hold. We'd like to do the flagpole if possible. We'd like to do more amenities. The guys are actually putting in a path right now over towards on Nigel's side of the park.
Yay.
They got rid of the Groundhog Hotel.
Yay, yay.
I got another one in here.
So is the flag? Has anybody contacted the Harpster family?
No, I haven't heard from them.
Okay. That's it.
Any other?
Okay,
Okay.
you want to go to 2023 for us?
Yes. In 2023, we have seven places that we are going to be looking at. In the Harpster Park, we are going to be continuing to do pathways, benches, and landscaping. And we put the gazebo on the back burner, but there are still some people who are talking to me from there who are saying, when is the gazebo going to go in? So I think that we will be looking at surveying there again. In Yoder Preserve, we have long since talked about the amphitheater, and that's one of the things that we want to get done in 2023. Plus, we intend to install new wayfinding signage and revamp the entrance with a new kiosk and benches. They're getting pretty worn right now. Also, Phasic Park tot lot, the stormwater basin upgrade that I mentioned that we wanted to look at. We are planning to do what we can there. We are trying to get funds from the Susquehanna River Basin Committee, but some residents there have requested that we look into doing that. On the Tussipun Park, we're still looking at some things, what we plan to do there, but we want to get some funds so that we can install additional ADA fishing piers, and we want to look at doing part of the path network. But anything we do there, we're trying to coordinate with the church up there because the park and the church grounds go together, and it's hard to tell sometimes where each one is. So we're trying to coordinate what is going in there so there isn't any problem at all. In Country Place Park, we have been taking down trees. We're going to be continuing that. There are a lot of dead trees up in there we're going to continue to do. We are anticipating getting a parkland fee in lieu funds from the developer of the Hawk Ridge project. And the money we get from there, we're going to be looking at the slide that's there. You're all Bowlesburgers, so you probably know about the slide, but I didn't, even though I lived here for a long time. It's a very nice thing to have, but it needs some work, and so we're planning to use that parkland fee in lieu for that to make it the necessary changes in that slide. It's metal, and I imagine that if you were sitting on a like a piece of paper or something that has a slide, you could go pretty fast down through there.
They all used it.
They all used it. And then on the diamond, some of the plantings are going to be replaced that we lost due to the drought. And there's going to be some other work, like the bases for the signs will be replaced, and the signs will probably be refurbished. Then we had created a subcommittee for Eagle Scout projects. We ended up getting a lot of Eagle Scout projects, but Amy always had to deal with them, even with all her other stuff that she does. And so we trying to give her a little break. So we created a subcommittee who will be dealing with all of the Eagle Scouts projects. And that's what we're going to try to do for 2023. Are there any questions?
Anybody?
Question. I'm on that storm garden, rain garden. It's a great idea. Although don't put about half the things you recommended to put in that. I built a rain garden, and I put about half of what's recommended. It's still overgrowing, so it can be nice. It can be either made high maintenance or medium maintenance. So you want to make sure that it's a small medium maintenance thing. But they look nice if they're done right. If you get the right trees that are low maintenance,
Right.
really grow, they can be done nice. But only go about half of what's recommended planting in that rain garden.
Thanks.
And the only other thing is the diamond. We've had a lot of suggestions on it, what we're going to do there. But I think we need to spend some money on the diamond. That's more or less our trademark. That's Bowlesburg's trademark. And that's what you look at, you come to the diamond, or anything you look at, you see the diamonds, and it just needs refurbished. And I'd like to see us keep those pedestals there. Maybe have to replace one. I'm looking at it sliding sideways. But anything we can do to that diamond to freshen it up, make it look attractive, I think, because that's our trademark, Bowlesburg's trademark. And
It's noticed right away.
it is, yeah.
I might add that yesterday I got an email from a resident who was standing next to the fountain, and the fountain fell apart. So Donnie and I went down this morning before the weather started. And it was not this resident's fault. This resident apologized profusely, and I'm like, no, it's fine. So we went down this morning, and the top of it was in the planter, and it was rotten. So we took the top part of it off, and now in my spare time on all those conference calls today, I was Googling decorative fountains and decorative statues, because we're going to have to find, we think we can take the David Bowl plaque off the front, but we have to find something else to put there because that thing is totally rotten. So
Yeah, it's
if you see a bag over top of what was the fountain, that would be why.
well, that actually was a fountain, and we had to shut the water off there for some reason. But that was always a place to stop and get a drink.
Yeah.
If you're out running around town, you stop and get a drink of water. But
You run around town?
all the time. So yeah, I think that I'm glad it says like number 3. I don't know if this is prioritized or not, but I'm glad to see number 3 is on your list because I think that's needs freshened up or whatever.
Yeah.
More of a garden rather than just a diamond out there. So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
Okay.
What, number 3, what's your cost guesstimate of doing that with the SRBC? Because I've done some work with the SRBC. So.
Denny, I think we put the grant in for, I think it was $42,000. We have to convert the basin. It's not all the rain garden. It's a 2-part project. So we put in for, Jerry did the grant application for us. So we put in for, I believe it was $42,000, and then we would match.
It'd be a
like
match,
five-
that's a match program.
Yeah, but we don't have to match a percentage, so we're gonna match like 5,000 plus our in-kind time. So we would do the outfall first, and then the next year we would come in and do the rain garden.
Would that help with our MS4?
Yes, it's on our pollution reduction plan.
I like that.
Yeah.
I've worked with SRBC, so I can give you some help with contacts.
Nigel, you have anything you want to comment on?
Well, I'm really pleased about the Yoder Preserve. That's amazing that that's coming along, and, almost done, and it's just a fantastic
We're going
thing.
to get an amphitheater in there.
The amphitheater coming in, that'll make for a location for some pretty interesting, could be for some pretty interesting events. And,
Oh, yes. Yes, I think
that's
so
a gem,
too.
and the township was really lucky to, the community, I should say, was really lucky to get it, and we were really lucky that it was a grassroots drive to come up with the money to get that property.
Right.
I'm really pleased how it's developing. I've been
Yeah.
up there a few times, and I really love it.
It's one of the lesser known ones, I think. Yeah. Even in the
Yeah.
township, like not everybody is aware that we have that wonderful
It's so
thing.
hidden.
Yes.
It is, yeah.
You know.
But I think that
Let's put a
the
big neon sign at the entrance.
I think the
It's on the
amphitheater
parking
will help with that.
It's on the parking lot. They'll find it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Anyone else?
and, yes, go ahead.
Can you come to the microphone, please? We're on CNET.
You gotta be, we're on TV. They want to see you. Somebody might come up and ask you for your autograph, you know?
Hi, Diane Farr. I just wanted to also add another really good thing that took place, and I think Frank Harden knows this, and that is we were able to add tot swings to the country place and also another set of swings, and they're beautiful, they're bright, they did wonderful pits for them, and we're really hoping to give that park a shot in the arm.
Yep. And that's going to be part of my comment. Some of you know I drive shuttle van a couple days a week for a local car dealer, and I bring a lot of people to Boalsburg. And whether they're longtime residents or new residents, the one thing I hear all the time is how great the parks are and how much they can walk. And we have a walking community, and I think the more we do with these parks, the better we will be. And I will tell you that our crew, Donnie and them, do a great job. They built the pits, by the way. And they were up there the other day, and they've started taking invasive species out of the side of that hill. If you haven't been up there in the last month, you're going to be surprised how big that park got. And so like I said, I think you guys have done a great job, and I think you just keep up the work. And just all we ask is that give us enough heads up when you need something from us, so we don't have to do it at the end. So thank you. All right, next on the group is the Shade Tree Commission. Who we got for the shade tree? Oh, here he comes. Okay.
Oh, here he comes around the bend.
I don't want to walk up front.
So I'm CJ Henry with the Shade Tree Commission. I have a thank you and kind of a funny to tell you before I get started. Just before, when I was eating dinner, when I came down here, I had a memory pop up on my phone. And 12 years ago today, I stood in front of you with my wife trying to get my business moved to up to Boalsburg, and thank you for allowing that to happen. And it's been 12 years, so happy anniversary to us. So we'll start with what we did in 2022. As usual, we try to identify neighborhoods that need trees, planted new trees. So this fall we planted 11 trees. I think Scott's Landscaping did that for us. Yeah. So we continue to try and identify those too. So if anybody you know needs trees, looking for some street trees, by all means reach out to us. We we're still working on this. Number 2, the Village of Bollesburg tree plan review and the ordinances. We devoted a lot of time last year to this. We began work on the landscape buffering regulations, and we hope to have recommendations ready for the Planning Commission and the board. We were saying the first quarter, but that's probably going to be a little later now since the meeting got pushed. The Bowl Avenue tree project, last year we treated the arborvitae for bagworm, and I think all those plants are still doing well. I think a couple of them, the greens come back and replace a couple in the spring. So all those trees seem to be doing okay. Hopefully this should be the year we notice some growth on them, as it's be their 3rd year. So there were no regional shade tree commissions for us, or commission meetings for us to attend last year. And as every year, we continue to review our species list to update it to trees that need removed from the list, or newer trees that will serve our needs for us. Amy does a great job looking for possible funding sources for our tree-related work. So big thanks to Amy for taking care of all that. Maintenance and care of existing trees. We did the bagworm treatment and pruning at Liberty Hill as well. And pruning was also completed by the township in Fairfield. We did not do any educational and outreach last year, as I don't think there was too much to actually attend. And the township again was designated a Tree City USA in 2022. How many years running has that been, Amy?
Since 2008, we just found out today that we're officially another Tree City USA. So we just got the designation.
Are there different levels of that?
Yeah, there's Tree City USA, and then there's a Tree City USA growth. What we always get docked on is we never have an official celebration. Like for a couple years we did.
Oh, we can have celebrate.
And like a couple years we did, and like 5 people came. And this year, I always say, like, we went on it when we go on tree walks pretty much all summer. So I just put down a tree walk. And this year they were like, you need a program. And so I wrote back and I'm like, we try to embody what trees mean to us every day, and that's why we were on our tree walk. We don't have time to have a celebration. And they were like, you're in.
So there's a higher level. There is a higher level.
There's a higher level, but we probably have to have like 3 celebrations, and then we're done.
That's right. Let's aspire to that.
Yeah, we'll just mention trees. On
Let's aspire to that. No, make it like.
Something celebration?
We're supposed to have like a program, and we're supposed to like we could, yeah.
What if we just met and planted a tree somewhere?
We could do that too.
Does the celebration have to be like really positive?
Yes.
Because here's why I say that, because sometimes if you come up and see me at the Elks and I'm in the trees, I have a celebration. It might not be the most positive celebration, but I have a celebration.
Yeah,
They have a guidelines for this celebration, or just any kind of celebration?
It's any kind of celebration.
We'll work on that. Be prepared for
Would you
celebration.
celebrate for that?
We need to We need to hug some trees this year.
Be prepared for a tree celebration.
All right, so does anybody have any questions on 2022?
You have a list of trees you're replacing this year? I mean, have you compiled that yet?
Yeah, we did, not for this year. At the end of 22, we did remove a couple and we did add a couple. I don't have those with me. I'm not sure what they were.
That'll be correct. These are only trees on township property.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
On the Bull Avenue tree, are all of the residents in that stretch interested in trees, or didn't we have some resistance from people not wanting trees planted on that section?
I
recall that discussion.
I think the discussion piece that we had with the residents, and they were great. We took away their buffer because all those trees died.
Down below.
They wanted more of a screening. Like I think they wanted a wall
screening.
of arborvitae. And we looked at doing a fence originally, but we couldn't afford it. Fences are very expensive. So I think they're all pretty happy with it. I think as things start to this year kind of hit their peak and start growing, then we can we've always wanted to try to fill in some of those places and put some more trees in. But it's starting, even last year I noticed it was starting to look a lot better. It's just you went from those trees that were 40 years old and huge, and there were 30 of them like in a row, to these smaller plantings, and I think it was an adjustment for some folks.
Wasn't there a path planned for that project?
There was, but there's not enough right away. The right-of-way does this weird thing where it shrinks in the middle and then it goes wide again.
There's some drainage issues down there too.
Yes, yeah, it's very
And
flat.
that's, I think we'll hit that too. One of the things on our 23 work plan is we're going to fertilize those arborvitaes, which will really give them a boost this year. So typically in the landscape, the third year of your plantings is really when you'll see the plants start to really grow and
That will help
mature.
with some of the moisture drain off.
It should. As the plants grow, they're going to absorb more water. Obviously, they're not going to tolerate a swamp. So.
Yeah.
You know, the one thing, I know a few years back that there was some issue where you guys had trees to plant but nowhere to plant them. And I wasn't aware of it, even though I sit on the board until Amy told me one day, and I said, well, yeah, I've tried to put a tree in my front yard for 20 years and they always die. Well, mine's still in there after 3 or 4 years. But the point is, do our residents know that if they want a tree that's in their, you know, it's in our right of way, which would be in their front yard, that they should let us know, so when we have trees to plant, we can you know, hook them up with a tree. Is that something we don't have a program like that?
We do. We have the tree pusher, which is Ron Spinelli on the tree commission, and then Andy Glitzer, who's also on the shade tree commission. He went out one year. He lives in Willowbrook, and he went out and knocked on doors and talked to neighbors. And then usually word gets around that we're looking to put trees in, and then we hear from everybody in one area. We do in the past. We have put stuff in the township newsletter as well to let folks know that we'll put trees in for them. And we've had people call that don't realize we take care of the trees in the right of way. And they've called to say, oh, I think, you know, I need to do something to this tree. What do I have to do? And I'm like, let me measure it because it's probably my problem and not yours.
Yeah,
That could be part of the celebration.
yeah, we celebrate cutting a tree down.
Advocating more planting.
Yeah.
Well, what's Arbor Day?
We proclaim every day Arbor Day in Harris Township.
There is an Arbor Day
Yeah, there is.
It's in April.
in April.
It doesn't work real well in central PA in April.
Well, we might think of
Well,
something.
doesn't the maypole count? When we do the maypole?
The maypole.
Yeah, wouldn't that count? It's a tree. You get
But-
The maypole is not
Okay.
a tree.
Nigel, since everybody's, do you have anything you would like to comment on
No.
this? Okay.
Right, the maypole is not a tree.
Oh, well.
The regional
Looks
tree
like one.
commission meetings, how are
State-
they working in terms of learning things from other?
Well, I think on the 28th of this month, there's a class at Penn State that we can take. It's a Zoom class online.
Oh, okay.
What was that one about?
That's on sidewalk and tree conflicts.
Yeah, which is a good one. That's a
Good luck
big
there.
course.
Yeah,
to
we
go
have
to.
like 3 of the people on the Shade Tree Commission signed up for that
Is it a
class.
no-cost program?
I'm not sure. It's through Penn State Extension. The regional meetings that we used to have, Alan Sam at the borough used to organize them, and he's retired. So
Okay, so on to the 23 work plan. We've hit on some of the stuff that we're going to take care of. Obviously, number one, we'll continue to plant trees where needed. And I guess word of mouth is probably the best way for us to spread, you know, to neighbors if you see a tree that has died and needs to be replaced, or we can just pass that along. The big one for us this year is the buffer ordinances. We're going to continue to work with that. We started that with Bill Elmendorf in 2019. And like I said, we hope to get a plan to you guys here fairly soon. And I want to come back to this because Amy has put together a slideshow presentation for you guys. We have some questions for you that will tell us how to proceed on making the changes to some of these ordinances.
That's nice.
The Bowl Avenue trees, again, we were just talking about those. We are going to fertilize those. And obviously still additional locations for new plantings will also be considered. Pest management, this is probably going to be a bigger one for us this year, as well as the gypsy moth. Now the spongy moth is going to be back. Bagworm has always kind of been an issue with us for the last couple of years. And one thing to keep an eye on is the spotted lanternfly. It's probably going to be, from what I've learned from Bartlett, it's going to be more prevalent in the area. It was already found in Lamont. So that's something that we're going to really have to keep an eye on over the next couple of years.
It was found on my deck. I squished one.
We got some skids in of block from Philadelphia area, and it was just covered with them.
Oh, it
And,
was?
yeah, we turned them into Penn State. So they're here. They're coming. unfortunately. The Regional Shade Tree Commission meetings, I think we touched on that. Is it Patton Township or Ferguson Township? Are they doing one this year?
Ferguson Township has they have a tree commission now. And
Don't they normally have a meeting though that we can attend to?
the borough was doing it in the past.
Oh, okay.
But Ferguson has the old borough's arborist.
Okay.
So I think maybe I'll bring this up with the managers because I thought it was very worthwhile when we all got together. So maybe we can see if we can organize and do something.
Okay. And then again, I mentioned the class on the 28th that Penn State's doing. I know some of the committee is going to be there. We'll review the species list again. That's kind of a continual thing as, trees and plants begin to get different illnesses, diseases. So we continually update that as we learn more. Funding for tree-related needs. That's kind of on Amy's plate. Looking for money from Keep Pennsylvania Beautiful, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and Arbor Day Foundation. Maintenance and care of existing trees. Again, I touched on that earlier. We continue to identify neighborhoods that need trimming, pruning, disease control, pest control. And Akey's does a lot of that work for us as well. And now the township with their truck is able to do something for us as well. Education and outreach. We will continue to promote its work through articles in the township e-updates and on the website and the Facebook page. And Tree City USA, we're already in for the year, right? I will turn the last part of this over to Amy so that she can show you guys the presentation that we put together for the questions that we have for you regarding the buffering decisions.
Share your screen first. Share.
Yeah.
PowerPoint.
This one.
Yep.
She went to questions for the board, right?
There we go.
You do it there.
Okay. Okay. Okay, hopefully the people at home can see this. Okay, so as CJ mentioned, and at the request of the supervisors and others, we've been hearing about the landscape buffering for quite a while. The Shade Tree Commission's been looking at our buffering regulations. So they started in 2022, and we have 3 types of buffers in the township. We have regulations in the corridor overlay district, buffering between commercial industrial uses and residential uses, and parking lot buffers. So what we want to do tonight, we have some questions we want to ask you so that they can continue their discussion. They met with Scott Burke from Scott's Landscaping back in November. They had a very good conversation with him and with some others about buffering and about what people are seeing as their practitioners, landscape practitioners. Of course, CJ has a lot of experience with this as well. So we had some good input, and we want to, before we formalize recommendations, get some input from the board. Okay, so the corridor overlay district was adopted in 1992. And I did some digging back through the minutes then. It was a regional ordinance, and it was intended to discourage strip development. Back in the day, no one wanted us to look like Plank Road in Altoona, and that was actually communicated in the minutes. And I think it was something that came out of the comp plan at the time. The ordinance was amended in 2002 to simplify the regulations. The landscape requirements apply when there's subdivision or land development submitted for projects on properties that are within 660 feet of the center lines of Route 322 and 45, which includes the bypass. And again, intended to reduce the visual impacts of development. Our maintenance facility was subject to the corridor overlay district regulations. Projects are mostly non-residential in nature and are required to show a planting plan for different types of plantings, canopy trees, understories, shrubs, and their amounts determined by a chart that weighs the proposed land use with existing neighboring land uses and requires more plantings of each type of foliage as intensities of the proposed and existing uses increase. There's also regulations for inventories of larger trees, tree preservation, and replacement standards for when trees aren't preserved. And I won't read the regulations there. And I do say that Todd is on this call and Mark is also here, and they deal with this every day. I do not. So if you have questions, they can answer them. So this is an example of what a corridor overlay buffer yard would look like. And it is basically, and this is consistent with reading the minutes back from 1992, it's basically a wall of landscaping so that you can't necessarily see what's on the property behind it. And it becomes, in our maintenance facility, when we planted, we lost 37 trees the first year because they're not planted in appropriate spaces, it's too many trees, and also there's a lot of deer down there, so that's kind of problematic. So additional buffering regulations that we have, and I think these are probably the ones that we don't think are problematic because these have a different intended use. We require a buffer yard if you're putting in a commercial or industrial zoning district and you adjoin a residential district. So you're buffering the residential district or residential use from seeing the commercial or industrial use. And this one is it must be at least 25 feet wide on the non-residential property except along a public street. And we also have parking lot buffer plantings that are required to, again, these provide headlight screening for vehicles using parking lots. They allow for pervious areas within a parking lot for stormwater to infiltrate, and they reduce runoff. So again, we don't think that the parking lot plantings and the buffering between commercial, industrial, and residential are the issue so much as it is the corridor overlay district that is the issue. And if you look, we've had a lot of development along the corridor overlay with the Liberty Hill project, our project, some of the other industrial projects down along Discovery Drive. We do have additional buffering regulations within Village Commercial, and these were just done in 2018? And these are much simpler and much easier to understand. They require fewer decorative plantings than in the corridor overlay, but they emphasize visual screening with neighboring residential zoning districts and parking lot vegetation. And I'll show you an example of what a village commercial planting looks like. So if you see that, that's a lot less plants than the corridor overlay. And it's probably a lot less cumbersome to the developer that's actually doing that.
Apparently this isn't working for people.
Oh.
Just texted me on
Todd can't see
I don't know
it.
if that's what needs to be advanced.
I have no idea.
You
Okay.
lost something?
The people on Zoom can't see this, I'm sorry. Sorry, Todd. So we have a couple of questions for the board that we'd like to go through tonight. And I think this is the most important one. What is the intent of the buffering regulations? What are you making faces?
No, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on.
Oh, okay. What is the intent of the original buffering regulations? The original intent, as I mentioned in the corridor overlay, seemed to be to screen out the properties located along 322 and 45 from view. Is this something you're still in agreement with? So maybe we'll tackle those first two questions.
Okay, Bud, anybody want to tackle that one? If not, I can say.
I think it's, you should keep it, you know.
What, I guess, what was the question?
For sound and screening, both.
What was your question?
What is the intent?
What's the intent of the buffer
Of the
regulation?
buffering, and do you agree, the corridor overlay, when that was laid out, the intent of that was to screen, like you weren't supposed to, they talked about not being able to see the development from 322 or 45. They didn't want Plank Road. Do you still agree with that? Because that's how you end up.
I don't follow that. You don't see, they don't see the, what from the 322? Don't see
You're
what?
not supposed to see the, Todd, do you want to chime in here?
Well, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, one of the original intents, and this was even before I started working here, was to provide a visual screen from the corridor roads from developments. So that was 45 and 322 and the bypass. I don't know that I think that was a well-intentioned regulation, but given how long it takes for trees to grow to a height that they would have actually screened the developments, I don't know practically that was a good idea. And the regulations really contain no standards for how far apart the trees should be. Should they be a continuous string of trees to provide that screening? People are able to group trees within the required buffer yards to allow for views of their business, of their signs, things like that from the corridor roads. So it may or may not still be a good criteria to use for establishing these planting things. That's the question we're asking. Do you want to be able to screen visually from the corridor roads these developments, mostly commercial and industrial, or do you want those buildings and parking lots and things to be able to be seen from the corridor?
Can I make a comment? I think I can simplify this. I don't think we're against the buffer. I think we still want to have that non-site buffer there. I think what we're talking about is the quantity. I mean, if you look at them, we're sacrificing how close we're putting plants and trees. We're putting them so close together that they die, and you have to replace them, and you keep having to replace them until they mature, and sometimes they don't get a chance to mature. So I think it's more the quantity. So I think we need to look at, okay, what are the best things to block out and that we can put less of them in? I mean, I always go back to the Potter's Mill Gap, and you look down over and see that one island. They got so many trees planted in there, I'll bet half of them don't
Well,
survive.
they're buffers though, they aren't buffers.
Well, I know that, but that's the point. The point is, it's not that we don't want to buffer. I think we put too many trees in one area, and that's the thing. That's what we want you to look at,
That's
the
what-
density. We want you to look at the density of it.
You do want to buffer, but you want to be careful where you buffer.
Yeah, and how much?
Yeah, you got to be careful where you buffer. I mean, I think if buffering is important. But if, for instance, on our village district down here, on Bull Avenue or down where we're at now, if you want to develop that, for instance, any one of those buildings come down and somebody wants to build something else up there, we're going to require parking in back of that, and then all of a sudden we put these plantings, 25-foot wide plantings, and that takes up your parking. Oh, you can't have parking? Now what are we going to do? So you need to temper buffering with the use of the property. I mean, I certainly don't want, because it's going to be our whole corridor is going to be very close-knit down here. Whenever they start, if something would come down, I'll give an example, the Harris Motel. If that would come down, somebody wanted to put something in there, they would have to provide parking in the back of that, if I remember correctly, right?
Well, actually, Mark, why don't you talk a little bit, excuse me, about what we did with the village commercial, because we have different buffering regulations for that.
Okay,
Yeah, the
but
buffering regulations from corridor overlay district are much more intensive than what is in the village commercial district down here that you're talking about, Mr. Graham. So you are correct that the parking
he died,
can't,
Mr. Graham died, by the way. But
you can't have the parking in front of the building, but it can be beside the building. You just can't be in front of it. So it's just
or in back of it, I understand.
or in back of it, right? So you
Okay.
can have it on either side of the sides of the building or in the rear of the building, just not between the building and the street.
Right.
And then the plantings, as Amy put up the renders here that we did, there's far fewer plantings required. Now, we didn't do a lot of variety. We did a lot of canopy trees in one, and the other one we just did understory. But you have the ability as a property owner to kind of decide what you want to do and mix and match, shrubs and understory. It's just far less dense. I don't know that it's still a low enough density to survive and do well, but we cut down the amount of plantings required.
Yeah, that
From
when
the
I
corridor.
first looked at it, I was concerned because you definitely probably want some little bit of a buffer, but 25 feet, and that takes parking. That restricts what you can do on that piece of property. And I think you probably still want to have some delineation from the buildings behind it, if there are not too many buildings behind that place, but that's one thing you need to look at.
Can they do a
I don't have
fence,
the
a
answer
fence
to
in
that.
lieu of can they do a fence in lieu of plantings? Or is it one or the other?
Fences are not very attractive.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm just asking.
Todd actually has his hand up, so let's
Okay.
let Todd chime in. Go
Well,
ahead, Todd.
before Todd comes in, that's what I have envisioned instead of the earlier one with all the plantings. I would sooner see something like this than have all those 6 deep plantings,
Well,
and something like that.
that's another
So-
issue altogether.
But no, I think that is the issue. We want
no,
less
but-
density.
Well, yeah,
Well,
it's part of it.
let's
yeah.
let Todd
Go ahead,
answer.
Todd.
He can answer the fence question too.
Yeah, I think an important point of the village, part of the village commercial regulations that we changed we changed the setbacks. So where the front setback was previously 50 feet from the edge of the street right of way, it's now a minimum of 10 and a maximum of 20. So you're not still going to be pushing the building back to the middle or the back part of the lots. The building is going to be toward the front of the lots, which leaves ample room behind it on most lots to provide both your parking and your landscaping. So while we are requiring some plantings for landscaping, we're requiring a certain amount of parking. The regulations actually provide more usable area on all those lots for both. So that shouldn't be much of a concern going forward in the village commercial zoning district.
That's what's a concern on me, and definitely you wouldn't need to buffer between a business has a license in somebody's residential house, you have to, I agree with that part. 25 feet seems pretty wide to me, but I don't know what a good buffer area would be. You can plant some nice shade trees, you can plant some evergreens in less than 25 feet, so I don't know how that would
With the
work.
discussion we had a while back about sidewalks,
Yeah.
how would buffering impact that, or how would sidewalks impact the buffer, and how would the buffering impact the sidewalks with respect to setting those plantings back from the road
The biggest
versus the right of way of where the sidewalk goes?
The biggest issue with the sidewalks is more the shade trees. So in a parking lot scenario, if you're trying to block headlights, you're not going to want shade trees to do
No.
that. You're going to want understory shrubs. And that they don't really create any kind of a conflict with the sidewalk because the root system never really gets large enough to raise and heat the concrete. So in that instance, I don't think that it would be too much of an issue.
Well, we had a presentation from McCormick Taylor about the road diet issue and changing where certain lanes are, left turn lanes. Does that impact sidewalks and trees plantings?
It shouldn't, no, and as far as the front yard requirements out in the village commercial district, we only require for the front yard to have small trees. If you're not, we don't have any canopy or any medium size, they're all small or shrubs, so I don't know if that's gonna, I think that might mesh well what you were saying as far as not impacting, you know, with
Yeah,
roots
you-
and whatnot.
You've got Bowl Avenue on the bottom of both of these, option 1, option 2, without sidewalks.
That's, yeah, well, that's true. I mean, we require them to put a sidewalk in. If they want to put it in the PennDOT right away and PennDOT's okay with it, that's fine too. But the plantings need to go on their property.
Planting would go on their property.
Yes, and that's why we showed it on those renderings. It was on the property.
What's the right-of-way width on that road?
I think it varies.
Yeah.
And at the time we were putting this ordinance together, I think there was still a hope that the road diet might result in there being both bike and pedestrian facilities developed within the right-of-way itself. So the thought was basically where the front property line is back would be available entirely for plantings.
Maybe a tight fit.
The other issue is the headlight buffering things, which are important. If you're facing out to the cars can face the highway, but I think you have to delineate where you actually need one of those, because if you have parking that's facing a stream, I don't think you need to worry about the headlights setting into the stream.
Well, and that's
or
an
into a
issue.
forest.
That's an issue that we've talked about quite a bit in the Shade Tree Commission meetings because every site is so specific.
Yeah.
There's not one set of rules that's going to cover every site. You know, part of the issue from not on a Shade Tree Commission, but as a landscaper in town, one of the issues that we've noticed is that engineers are putting together the planning plans at your requirements, and they know nothing about tree spacing, tree health. And so all they do is they just jam the plants in to meet your requirements, and you guys are saying,
send-
okay,
and then
the
send the
requirements
bill.
are met. And then we go out and have to plant, you know, Norway spruce 10 foot on center or 8 foot on center that are gonna get 100 feet tall, you know, so.
Well, I think
there's-
that's
It's a waste of
yes,
money,
yes.
and, you know, especially with the cost of trees, you know, and I preached to Amy about this for years, and then finally when you guys got your building built, Amy's like, I get it now,
Yeah.
I get it.
Well, if you look across the street at the energy plant and the vertical, those, what's going to happen in 5 years over there?
Yeah, they're all
It's
gonna
going to be
die.
unbelievable.
I think that's one of the, what you just said, I think is one of the reasons we sent this for review, was the fact that how do we amend our ordinance or make it stronger or whatever we've got to do, that designers and engineers don't do that. That they can look at the property and say, okay, the way this property is situated, it's going to need a headlight buffer on this side, it's going to need this on that side, or this over here. That it's unique to the property, and we don't end up with properties coming in that plant themselves out of the property, so to speak.
So I had made a suggestion in one of the last meetings, I think, right before we met with Scott, that if you could write something in it that an actual landscape designer has to provide the landscape plan rather than an engineer. Because at least then a landscape architect or a landscape designer is going to know what the spacing should be. They're going to know what's going to survive. And maybe it's something simple as we would just have to write some ordinances for that specific committee that they need to block headlights from hitting other properties.
But not necessarily where into a forest or into a stream.
Right, exactly.
The should parking lot buffering requirements, would that apply to our parking lot here?
Yes.
Because of the tightness of the, I think our property line is backs on those two sheds.
But we're gonna have.
So that's going to be an interesting issue of getting a buffering zone in there
Right.
without.
Well,
being-
it all comes down to, makes sense, put landscaping where it is buffering where most beneficial, not where it's not needed, into forest or into trees.
Well, but-
and let the business owner landscape his own property to the extent.
Well, I think what you just said, I think if there's some way you can bring that kind of wording to us that would make sense in an ordinance, I think that's kind of what we're looking for. You know, let's have something that protects us, does the buffering, blocks out lights, whatever it needs to be.
Where needed.
Or, yeah, whatever, but it's done with common sense, and we're just not gonna plant a million trees and hopefully fix the problem.
Right, and I think one of the ordinances that we need to fix is the overlay district. We need to lessen the amount of plants that's required in that. Because even if we had a landscape person design it, they're still trying to meet the requirements of all the trees. And I think that that's something that we need to look at. In our opinion, and this is kind of reverting back to the original question, is do you guys want to be able to see the businesses when you're coming down the road so you know where you're pulling into? Or are we sticking with the original plan where we're trying to hide the businesses so that they can't be seen?
I don't know. I don't see the benefit of hiding a business.
Yeah, I don't know what to hide.
It depends. I guess it would depend on the business. If it were a junkyard or something like that, but we don't have junkyards.
Right.
And
What's the
we don't
complexity
allow
of-
junkyards.
Could
and
I
that type of
propose
thing.
that we need to put this on another agenda item because we're going to.
Well, no, we're making recommendations.
Yeah,
We're
we're
just
not.
making-
Yeah, you're not gonna. Not to interject.
Let
I'm
me
sorry.
Okay,
You're not
finish.
gonna.
We're giving them guidance.
Yeah,
We're
they're
trying
gonna
to just
come
give them
back.
guidance, Denny.
Thank
Where we
you.
want them.
Well, I'm not
They're
sure
gonna-
we're getting very far in guiding because
No,
we're
this-
talking about all kinds of alternatives.
No, this is perfect because they need to spend their next meeting working on this, and they were waiting to have some guidance from you. And I think to summarize what I've heard is you like the new village commercial planting regulations, and maybe we can use that.
I don't know if we do or not.
Well, maybe we could
Well,
use that as something to rewrite the COD regulations with. And one of the other things that we talked about, and I know CJ's brought this up because it pertains to his property, if there's unique land features on your property, like CJ has hills, do you need to have a person put trees on top of hills that are already acting as a natural buffer? So,
And I think that goes back to Bud's statement about, planting trees against a stream bank.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to do that. In my instance, I had to plant understory shrubs as a buffer, and the road is 10, 12 feet higher than where I planted forsythia bushes. It'll probably never even reach the height of the road.
You planted forsythia. I thought I was the only one that did that. You actually planted forsythia bush.
I did, like
said,
20 of them.
What's that all about?
I got some you can dig up if you want them.
Right.
Anyway, well,
You can't transplant
I think
them.
from what I'm hearing, I think we're all kind of saying the same thing. We need to look at our program and find a way that we can write an ordinance that makes more sense and is flexible enough to be unique to a different property. So it's not something that, here's the plan and that we try to squeeze all the properties into that plan. I think we need to have something that allows the property to be put into the buffering. So I think that's kind of what we're
Is that-
saying, if that's what
And
you're
Todd,
asking.
is that okay? Would that work with you about it being property specific, or is that going to create a bunch of issues for you?
Were you asking me that question, CJ?
Yeah, I was.
Yep.
I think that's going to be a little bit challenging. I think if you're going to vary requirements property to property, you have to have some pretty clearly identified reasons as to why you're doing that. I mean, if you can cite elevation changes or abutting wooded properties, assuming that, there's some reliability, which there may not ever be, that it will remain a wooded property. I think if you have something tangible in which to base those things, those types of ordinances are more defensible than if you just loosely word an ordinance saying we're going to do it on a case-by-case basis, and depending on what plan submitted and how we feel on a given day, we're going to make them do A, B, C, or D. It has to be pretty well defined why you're providing variable regulations, and then those regulations have to make sense themselves.
So if we rewrite the overlay requirements and then require the new properties to have a certain amount of plants that have to be designed and approved by you, by a landscape designer, that would be okay? As
Well,
long as they're meeting,
I think-
as long as they're meeting the requirements of the amount of plants.
Yeah, I think, and again, this is going to probably sound worse than I mean it to, but I think the engineers that have designed all the plans that people are complaining about the plantings could have had enough common sense to space the plants out further, but either the property owner wanted their businesses to be seen, or he just didn't care. They just wanted to meet the regulations. We can require that a landscape architect or somebody else with a specialty in that area design these plans, but if they do a crappy job, we've not really accomplished anything. So I think if you want particular spacing between species of trees, types of trees, sizes of trees, it might be worth considering putting that exact spacing in the regulations so that you're not relying on someone being good at something in order for the ordinance to work.
Yeah, and I understand that fully. I guess the hope was that landscape designers or landscape architects would be knowledgeable in the field enough to make a better decision than an engineer who's just trying to finish the job.
Well, it would seem to me that there should be certain shieldings if it's necessary, but I don't think you should leave it more or less up to the property what he wants his landscaping to be. Once he meets his minimal shieldings, if we need to shield it, or it felt like it has to be shielded, then I don't know why we have to dictate so much about each individual property owner or how they want to landscape their properties. I think that's a little bit invasive there, but
All right,
the minimum shielding is what we need. Yeah.
Okay, we need to move this on, and what I will say to you is that I think you understand where we're coming from on looking at this, and I'm going to go back to some of the things that we've done in the recent past with the ag regulations and this type of thing. Somebody out there in the world's doing this already, because you travel around and you see some really nice buffered properties that aren't overplanted and they're really done. Okay, let's find some of those places, see what their ordinances say, and see if it'll match something we can do here. So I think that's what we're challenging you to. So with that being said, I think we're ready to move on.
See you next year.
See you next year.
Now, you're going to see us again because we're going to have something to present to you.
All right. So I think we know where we want to go. It's just how do we get there?
Okay, I have one last question for Todd before we end. What are the regulations as far as replacing trees? How often is it 1 year that you go back to see if the trees have lived?
I think it's 3.
Now, I think in the corridor overlay, those buffer yard plantings, they have to be warranted for 3 years.
3 years? Okay. And then
yeah,
after
I'm
that,
not
though, after the 3 years, it's kind of whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, whatever's, if everything's still alive and everything's still in place after that 3 years, we're out of it. The township's out of it. Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have a warranty on anything else. The buffer yards that are required between non-residential and residential properties, they don't say anything about a warranty. I think they have some statement about trees that die must be replaced. So that's, I think, in perpetuity. If somebody takes down a buffer, that type of buffer, or half of it died because of a disease or something, we'll send them a letter saying you have to replace that.
Okay.
In Charlottesville, Virginia, there's a stretch of the road that meets our. It is a heavy bit. I'll get the name of the street, but they did the same thing. They have a bike lane. They have 3 lanes. It works out wonderfully. and it isn't overgrown, but it's a nice tree-lined area for just that. I forget what they call it, but I will get that
Get some
information.
pictures. Pictures
Yes.
of
Yeah, that'd be
great.
awesome.
Well, I found this in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette here I don't know when this was. This was in March of 2022, a year ago, 1 year ago. And it's some streets in Philadelphia. They look, but it's more than we want to do. I'm thinking, boy, that is overkill. And we want to be careful we don't overkill it on that. Yeah.
Right.
All right, okay.
Okay, thank you for
Thank
your
you.
input.
Oh, yes, sir.
Can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if you can know, but you may.
Thank you. My name is Mark Snyder. I'm a recent new resident of Folesburg, although I lived here in 1965 during ninth grade. My wife and I moved back, recently retired, bought a home on Harris Avenue, very happy there. I sing in the choir with Kent, the zoning person. I know he wants to
Are you
get
going to
home
give us a
quickly.
sample? Give us an example.
So
We can sing happy
I was
birthday
ready
to
to
these
sing
guys.
happy
Happy
birthday, but
They
felt
just
bad
sang
not
happy
to do
birthday.
that.
No, thank you.
I'm a retired urban forester and ISA certified arborist. I attended one of the tree commission meetings, and I want to keep attending those because
Good.
I've had 40 years of experience doing things like writing tree ordinances and writing speeches for the mayors for Tree City USA, Arbor
We have
Day
a celebration
celebrations,
coming up.
all that sort of thing, and redone ordinances that have to do with how many street trees, what the distances between them should be, and so forth. I want to offer my expertise and experience, however it'll fit in here. Diane Ishler also goes to my church, and I'm interested in talking to her about some of the things she does in parks. So I'm anxious to get involved. CJ, ask me questions next time I'm there.
Where did you live in 1965?
Pardon me?
Where did you live in 65?
I lived on Bell Avenue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it is Lance King, who was the Ferguson Township arborist, who is now the borough arborist, and Larry McGinnis is now the borough arborist for Ferguson Township. And he's an old buddy of mine because I was the urban forester for 17 years in Eugene, Oregon, and he was an urban forester right up the road in Portland.
Then you know a
Good
little
people.
bit about forest in Eugene, Oregon, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Forest
Good,
and
good,
people, because it's
good.
about working with people just as much as it is working with trees.
Well, thank you for offering, and like I said, keep in touch with Amy, and she can let you know when they're meeting and
When our
get you
celebration's
involved.
gonna be.
Yeah,
Our
when you say-
Celebration.
All right, let's move on here now, and we're gonna head to the big gun. The planning commission, our Kent's gonna do the planning commission. This will be short and sweet, I'm sure.
I don't expect any questions tonight. However, if there are questions, Amy Lork, our vice chair, has come to answer those. So I'm Kent Baker. I'm the chair of Planning Commission this year. Just got appointed for my second term, so just getting started on that. I'm going to go through some of these the goals for the work plan for 2023 and 2022 overlap. So I'm going to kind of do them both at the same time, back and forth a little bit. I'm just going to quickly list our 2023 work program. We have our first priority is the review of the residential zoning districts, and this year it'll be primarily the R1 district that we're looking at. Then we have the sign ordinance, which there's some extensive changes that need to be made there. The village parking issues and regulations. We'll be taking the recommendations from the village parking committee and try to work with the supervisors in coming up with some recommendations based upon what the village parking committee spent a couple of years working on. So we have the landscape buffering regulations on our list, which you just talked about for a few minutes. And then we have a review of home occupation regulations, which are definitely needed with all the changes that have been going on with work and people working in their homes. Then we have a review of the remaining zoning districts and a continuing education presentation. So that's the short list of our 2023 program. I'm going to just start back and go through them. and kind of compare them to the 2022 program. So I'll be jumping back and forth a little bit. And I guess if you care to, kind of, if you want to comment while I'm going through them, that's great. Or if you want to wait till I get through the whole thing, we can do it either way. So on the first item, the review of the residential zoning districts, that was an item we had, last year. In fact, we've been kind of on that since 2019. But mostly we were working on the village district in the past, where we came up with some changes. We had a demolition delay ordinance. We made some recommendations for changes in density and lot coverage and impervious coverage. And so for this year, we want to focus on the R1 district, and with a little bit of also comparing, looking at the multifamily districts as well while we're doing that. But primarily we're going to be looking at some of the vacant properties in the R1 and coming up with a hybrid zone that maybe could allow for a little higher density on some of the vacant properties. So we're going to be looking at some regulations related to that. And
excuse me, Ken, question. When you say higher density, would you be happen to be talking about, for example, say a pocket neighborhood type of a setup, or mini houses or something that
not necessarily. We've talked about that, but it's more related to density. And so what we're looking at right now is coming up with allowing some of the vacant areas located in the existing R1 district to have a combination of R1 and multifamily uses, both. And we're still going back and forth a little bit on the percentages there, but we'll be making a recommendation to you on that. If that makes sense. And that's what we have as our top priority for this year. So we're hoping to get through that pretty quickly here. The next thing we have is the sign ordinance. We actually had that on our list for last year, and we're kind of just getting started, and then the solicitor got in the way. And
gee, wonder how that happened.
Yeah, and looked at the ordinance and recognized that there's some things. There was a recent Supreme Court decision that does not allow regulations to be based upon the content of the sign, what's written on the sign. You can regulate the size, the type of the sign, where its location is, things like that, depending on zoning districts. So you can do all that, but you can't, your regulations can't specifically call out what can or can't be on the sign. And currently our regulations do that a lot. So we do have to make some major changes to the ordinance. And so we will be working on that. And I'm aware that there's some concern about the quantity of signs, particularly in the, in our commercial districts. Do we allow enough, or do we allow too much? So we're going to look at that. And personally, I think that I think we could allow. I would like to see us come up with some flexibility for larger buildings to have more wall signage, to allow them to have more wall signage, while still trying to keep some controls on the ground pole and the freestanding signs that are standing out on the edge of the property. So that's just a personal issue. But does anybody have any comments on the sign before?
About the signage? Well, my only comment was on the signs, and I didn't really get into the minutia of sizes and names we put on them, but the illumination of them. And I understand that also will come under our lighting ordinance, but I'm a little bit concerned with the illumination of signs, because with our new village district, if it ever takes off in 10 or 15 years, and we're already looks like we're going to be 2/3 of that car sales. From beginning, the car sales are car oriented down through there, and they tend to love their bright lights on their signs that light up and flash at night, or gas stations, which we have two, maybe we'll have one, I don't know. They love the big signs. That type of thing I don't think is conducive to what we want. And you work on the legal part of the signs, the illumination part that I would love to see us control somehow. And I'd love to see it only no internal lit signs at all. I don't know if that's legal, or only downlit signs. For instance, the veterinary hospital down here, her sign's very well lit up, but this light comes down onto the sign. It doesn't go this way or that way. And it doesn't start inside and go this way. The bar down here, they do the same thing. Their signs come down. And to me, if it's on the side of the building, come down this way. Now I know that sign manufacturers claim that they can do a good job of backlit signs, but I don't. They sell the signs, so that kind of concerns me. That's just one thing I'd like you to look at when we're looking at this sign ordinance, and in conjunction with the lighting ordinance too, because we have when we have village districts, we have village areas. All of a sudden, we want every business thinks they have to light their sign up. That isn't true. You don't have to glare. You have to see it 50 miles away. A nice, attractive sign is probably more inviting to a business than something else. So that's why don't come on in the sign ordinance. So the rest of it's up to the legal birds, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
The illumination of the signs, that's all. And I know this was talked many years ago, and that same idea was thought about, but never really got followed through. So maybe this would be a good time to look at that.
No. Well, I agree, and the Planning Commission will definitely take that to heart. And I know the technology's changed with the backlit signs and all that type of stuff, but I know there's regulations about lighting of signs, so I'm sure Mark can find some good examples for us to.
Well, I just want to protect this. We're a dark neighborhood after 8 or 9 o'clock at night, generally, or 10 o'clock at night, and I don't think we need to be. Well, anyhow, that's just something you want to work.
Well, one of the things you could do is say that the signs can be lit only during operational hours.
Well, you can't say that.
Because we have signs down here that the places are closed and they're up on all night. So if you're closed, you got to turn the sign off.
Either way on that, because we went through the lighting with that comes under the lighting ordinance. In some respects, lighting is
no backlit signs.
And lights are a good thing for security reasons, but they're also a bad thing for security reasons. Lights create shaded parking. So if you have parking lot lights, and there's shaded parts of your parking lot is shaded, it can't be seen. So it works either ways, but that's just my recommendation on the sign. Look at the sign. And that
good luck. Go ahead and you guys come up with something and get to us.
Yeah, we haven't put a lighting ordinance anywhere on our plan.
Well, no, I don't, but Amy tells me that might be part of the lighting ordinance. I don't know.
I mean, Todd, you're the one who deals with the sign ordinance more than anyone. So I know we've talked a little bit about the illumination, and I thought you had some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I'll just repeat what I said before. In talking to the people that design lighted signs and the people that install lighted signs, and I have some experience with this very recently with the Bowl Beer Works and their sign plans. They insist that internally lit signs are far easier to design and install so that they meet lighting regulations, simply because our zoning ordinance requires that when you're proposing any outdoor lighting, you have to show the anticipated lighting pattern. And if the bulb is contained within a fixture, they have the engineering and they have the the knowledge of how to project that the light's going to fall on the property. When you have an uplit sign or you have a downlit sign, according to them, not me, it's much more difficult to determine where things are going to fall, and it's much less accurate in trying to determine the limits of where the measurable foot candles are going to be. So that's what I'm hearing from the people that do this for a living. So I have no expertise in it whatsoever, other than driving down the street and seeing that the sign's lit on an internally lighted sign, the property's lit when an up-lighted sign or a down-lighted sign is in place.
Well, hopefully we can find some regulations that can, allow for that flexibility, but, still, adjust what our intention is to not have, have it looking like a spotlight when you're walking or driving by. Okay, I'm going to jump back and just kind of finish up some of our 2022 projects that we no longer are dealing with. First one is the utility grade solar projects. We did do some work, and Center Region was able to do a lot of work on it as well, and they did come up with a toolkit, and so we kind of just discussed that for a while, and we made a decision that it was good to have that toolkit. We didn't feel that it was a high enough priority for us to actually develop regulations for that at this time. We didn't see a need for it, but we were happy that we have the toolkit, and at such time that this becomes a bigger issue, then we would put it on a work plan in future years. Upgrade to the official map, had been worked on for a few years. The Parks and Rec Committee worked on it, and that was came through us, and also that was forwarded to the supervisors, and I think that's about done. Right?
They approved it on last week.
Okay, that's great. Sewage facilities planning, we based upon some issues that were coming up with some small subdivision, small or large lot, like a 2-part subdivision. We came up with a waiver list of waiver allowances for a non-building sewage facilities planning waiver, and we did send that to the supervisors, and you did adopt that last year, so that one's done. So I'll move back into the some of the other newer items, not necessarily new. The first one is number 3 on our list for this year is village parking, and again, as I mentioned earlier, there was an ad hoc committee that spent a couple years looking at a variety of different issues related to parking within the village, and came up with several recommendations to the board. So we will be looking at those recommendations and try to work with you on what is the most practical way to to manage parking in the village, and to allow some degree of flexibility for properties that can't meet the parking regulations on their own. So for whatever, they just the property's too small and the structure's too big, so that such things as off-site parking, or possibly even a maybe an in lieu of parking type thing, fee in lieu of parking. We'll be looking at different things like that. So, is there any questions on or comments on village parking?
Go ahead. Come up to the microphone.
So we wanted to do the shared parking, and that has been tabled here, okay? It seems like everything we have has been tabled. We have people who have troubles with the parking regulations and doing what they need to do or want to do. We also discussed an overlay. And I will make the suggestion to you, and I would really hope that you would start with looking at an overlay district within the village that will ease not only some of the parking regulations, but other regulations to allow some of these buildings to do what they want to do, need to do, can do, in order to get the maximum, I don't even know how to say it. But I know the overlay is going to take a long time. So us waiting till number 3 on the list, when you get down the list, for parking easement in the village that we've been talking about for a year and a half, and it has been affecting people for several more years prior to that. So if we could get some of this stuff pushed forward a little bit, the easy stuff especially, and then if we could start on discussing an overlay so that the research can be done on how we should do this best, which I think goes out of your hands, maybe goes in Mark's hands, or something to that effect, that would be really great, because a lot of this also affects my own property, and it affects what I can and cannot do on my property. So, and it's some of the stuff is silliness. Like, for example, putting in a new site plan. If I want to make a new site plan, all of a sudden, all these ordinances come into play, and I can't possibly provide the 40 to 60 parking spots I would have to provide to do something different with my property, like have a change of use, which in the brick building. So I would encourage you to move this forward a little bit and at least start discussing this immediately, and start at least getting some of these things like us being able to use the street parking as our own parking, and us being able to share parking and get this done, so we can at least have this to hold on to, which we don't even have yet. And we've been discussing this, and some of these are very easy things. We've been discussing this for what, a year and a half, going towards 2 years. So please, can we move this forward a little bit? I would encourage you to do that. I would appreciate it if you would do that. Thank you.
Just as information, the very first meeting of the Village Parking Commission was November of 2021.
No, it was August.
No, it was November of 2021.
Okay, this, when I see this, when we get this report, this plan tells us what they're gonna be working on this year. So that village parking is on their agenda to work on. But it's not something they can sit down one night and say, okay, here's what we're gonna do, and they make a list. So there's gonna be a lot of research, and they're gonna have to look at that. So, and that is up to the chairman, and they will do that on the planning commission.
That's why I'm asking if we can move that forward a little bit.
Yeah.
How much forward they're gonna work on it this year? I don't know.
No, I mean, I think, and hopefully
we could do that in next month's meeting.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we can kind of multitask. I mean, this is, you could say they're all number one, but, this is just kind of the way we see things as a priority list, but it's not like we're going to take one at a time. I see that we're working on multiple ones, because each of them are going to, we're going to have to get some examples, give some feedback, go back. So I see, we'll be working on, 2 or 3 of these at a time, and I do believe that all of them are going to take some time. I don't think they're that easy.
And the village, I'm sorry, but I mean, the village parking issue is intertwined with larger issues about the village, which the small area plan identified. In the small area plan, this was in other language and other plans, a harmonious mix of residential uses and businesses, and that harmonious mix has never been defined. So what we are proposing is, probably maybe not next month, but maybe April, the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission should sit down at their second meeting and just focus on village issues and just talk about these things, because the overlay will take a lot of research, but some of these questions that have never been answered need to be answered so that we can look at the overlay and work on those regulations. So that's something that we think needs to be just a whole separate meeting between the board and the Planning Commission to get everybody on the same page. And that's a bigger item, so it needs to be its own kind of discussion piece.
Well, there are at least 3, maybe 4 businesses that are directly affected now with this parking, and in some cases it's a hindrance. So in order to help our businesses, we need to do something. It may be temporary. Let's see how this works, but allow them to proceed with their businesses. Yes.
In your old Township College, the parking in Lamont is very attractive.
So
what they did with the parallel parking and the sidewalks.
Oh, you're talking about on Pike Street?
Yeah.
Yes.
Looks good.
That took a long time.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Half done now.
Yeah, that was great. No, I'm very happy with that. So I'm looking forward to when the weather's nicer. I'm going to go walk up and down.
Everybody.
So anyway, so noted. I agree. I hope we can get going on with these and make some progress on these, definitely these first few that I mentioned. The next one is the landscape buffering regulations, and I know that you talked about that, and the Shade Tree Commission will be doing a lot of the initial legwork on that, so we'll certainly chime in as well. Home occupation regulations is something that I think is important. There's been a lot of changes to people working, a lot of people working in their homes now, either working for a company or starting their own business. And so there's a lot of that going on, and I think that we need to change our existing regulations to try to just make sure that we don't have a home occupation that causes a parking problem or causes material storage and delivery problems coming in and out of the residential neighborhood. So it's just something that we want to allow this because it's a part of life now, home occupation. So we just want to make sure that it doesn't detract from the residential areas. And then this one's sixth one is probably one that's further down the list, and that's and this is actually a carryover from last year. But as we complete like our review of the residential district, we started with the village and we'll do the R1 this year. Then we'll continue to look at other zoning districts, the cultural district, the residential office, the general commercial, and the industrial districts, just to see any regulations that we need to update related to them. In that list, it has a comment about the plan scale regulations, about developers seeking waivers on the plan scale during the plan review process. We may be able to, that might be simple, we might be able to just tag that onto something else sometime during the year. So we'll try to take a look at that. And the last one I have here on the list is continuing education presentations. We find that they're very helpful. The Southern Region Planning Commission has been very good about coordinating, different educational events for us, and so we'll do those as time permits. So I think I've got everything, and I'll take questions.
All right, before we go any further, I see that we have our guest from down under. Bruce, do you have any questions or comments for the Planning Commission?
You're muted,
You're
Bruce.
muted.
Yep. No, nothing. It just sounds like they got quite the workload.
Yeah.
I agree. Okay, anybody else have anything they would like to ask?
Is the plan scale issue an MPC issue, or is that an individual municipality thing? We can decide that? So it's relatively easy. Okay.
Anything else from Nigel? Anything? Brett?
Well, I do want to throw something in here a little bit. It's interesting. One of my colleagues here dropped this book of it. It's Home from Nowhere. And it's I'm taking a lot of it out of context, but it talks about developing communities and one I want to read a little paragraph here that what this in context is. Once you've established your zoning areas like your commercial, your residential, and your where your junkyard is going to be, where your churches are going to be, this author, I don't know who he is, James Howard Kunstler was his name. He said, therefore, if you want to make your communities better, begin at once by throwing out your zoning laws. Get rid of them. Throw them away. Don't revise them. Set them on fire if possible. Make a public ceremony of it. Public ceremony is a great way to announce the birth of a new consensus. While you're at it, throw out your minor master plans too. They're invariably just as bad. Replace these things with new traditional town planning ordinances, which prescribes a more desirable everyday environment. And I think that is put it all in a nutshell. What that means, I don't know, but to me that means we've got a community. Let's not screw it up by having government you jump in here and doing something. So that's it. Thanks, Bruce, for the book.
Must be a good one. I'll have to
Okay,
take a look at it
if
sometime.
nothing else for Kent, we'll let you go back home and put your feet up or whatever. And you, Amy, and who else? You don't have anybody else. It's you and Amy here tonight.
No, it's just yes. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thanks.
So thank you for your report. All right. The next section originally, and I think Eric's back there. I'm pretty sure. I had thought that since we were looking at all our ABCs and what they did last year and where we wanted them to go next year, we would do something similar to COG. However, that's pretty much got put to bed here in the last month or so with goals and everything we've done on our committees. But something else has come up that I think would since we have Eric here tonight, it would be worth discussing, and that is that priorities. What are the priorities that we're going to do for the budget? So how do we take the priorities that we're going to identify and look at, and how do we get them to staff so that when they're going through their budgeting process, they know what's a priority. In other words, we really need to get this done this year and that done this year. The issue that you have to understand here is there are some things in the COG budget that aren't a priority. If we don't do them, we shut down. So there's some things that are going to be on that. So these things are going to apply more to a certain percentage of the budget that are more wants or needs or new things or heading in a different direction, improving COG or changing something. So that's something there. And you should have gotten a sheet. If you didn't, Amy's got them, that has the 8 priorities on it. When I was at executive committee yesterday, they talked about getting these talked about before the next executive session, so we could we want to get them approved early enough in the year so we can use them this year and get them prioritized. So I thought, since we're meeting tonight, it would be a good night for us to, they're right here if you want to see them. It would be a good meeting tonight for us to discuss these now, so we can pass them on, and we were I believe the only township that didn't meet before the next, when they were going to be looked at again. And these came from Bud, from you guys in the finance committee, so I'm pretty sure you guys have discussed that. So anyway, if you want, I will read the priorities that they have on here, and what they're asking for us is for us to prioritize them. In other words, which one do we think's number 1, 2, 3, 4, and that type of thing. So the first one they have on here is address economic impacts: inflation, deflation, supply chain challenges. Number 2, take care of what we own: safe, well-maintained, efficient facilities. Number 3, take care of COG staff: equitable pay, COLA, inflation, merit pay, benefits. Support the safety of those who live, work, and visit in the center region: code, fire, EMS, transportation facilities. Support an inclusive, healthy, and sustainable community. Prepare for future of the COG and the COG facilities, planning, etc. Support the economic vitality of the region. And the last one is support the region's efficient shared services delivery, joint initiatives, cooperative ventures, and other partnerships. So they would like us to do is discuss these, put our comments in of what we think are the highest priority in that group, the lowest priority, where we think they should be. And Eric, I'm going to turn this to you next and let you make some comments before we start our discussion. So Eric, if you want to come up there. We got a table chair if you want to
come. Microphone.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah. Sit next to me if you want.
You can get to sit next to Amy. Here, give him a microphone, Amy.
He's good.
Oh, he can hear you?
He'll get picked up.
Oh, he can hear you? Okay, all right. I just want to make sure. So go ahead, Eric. You can introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Eric Norrenberg, Executive Director, Center Region Council of Governments. I think you did a great job summarizing and providing that overview. The only couple of things I would add would be to remark that yes, this started with a conversation with the Finance Committee. Just recently, the first 4 items were used during the Finance Committee's prioritization of the budget request last fall, and one of the things that the Finance Committee had indicated is that they were interested in making sure that budget requests that were coming through the process initially this year for 2024 would be prioritized at the start, and requests that were coming through would conform with and align with the COG's priorities, rather than have that done at the back end during the Finance Committee review in the fall. So these items were developed not only with the feedback from the Finance Committee, but also with input from agency directors. And so the discussion tonight, and with each of the townships in the borough, you could suggest that there might need to be an extra 1 or 2 items added to the list. If you think beyond this 8, there could be another one that we hadn't thought of. That could be suggested, as well as any potential tweaks in wording, or, as you indicated, prioritizing. So hopefully we will get the priorities or the ranking of these back from each community in time for the Finance Committee to take a look at that on March 9th during their meeting, and then the culmination would go to the Executive Committee in March to determine if there are any next steps, or if there's clear consensus, then that will be provided to agency directors for use in prioritizing requests that come through. And these would be for new requests primarily, not existing requests. So when we're looking at the baseline budget for next year, you know, anything that's coming through new for the budget, we'd want to make sure it's aligned with COG priorities and not something that was not fitting with your vision.
Okay, so I guess if there's anybody, I know Bud, I was hoping that you might be able, since you.
I'm listening, you know. I'll bark last.
Okay, you want to bark
That's
last?
an interesting observation.
Okay, go ahead.
You said top 4, so I looked at number 2, care what we own, and number 6 is sort of being related to the current existing model of COG. I think those two go well together with respect to what we own, and what we own sort of takes us to the future. We have to take care of what we own, so we make the future. So I would put those two together. Number 1 and number 7 are both economic-driven kind of things. I'm not sure in the inflation, deflation, supply chain challenge, we have a lot of input to that, because those are sort of under the control of either vendors or manufacturers or something or other, and we end up waiting for things like everybody else does. So that's an economic issue. Supporting the economic vitality of the region. Goes along with inflation, deflation. The lower the inflation, I think the easier it is or better it is for attracting new business opportunities, new building development, new housing developments. I think we've seen that particularly downtown with the burst of high-rises. There has to be an economic issue driving that. That's beyond my understanding of why it's being done the way it is. So, and again, you know, that's tough, because as long as you meet the current standards within the borough, and in other cases in Ferguson Township, you'll end up with multi-story buildings because they meet the regs. Can't say yes, can't say no.
Nigel, do you want to add anything to this? Any comments you'd like to make?
Comments I have are economic things that are out, that are not under, you know, like within the COG. They really have very little influence over. I mean, the market's the market. What can we do with supply chain challenges?
Yeah,
I mean,
so
it just exactly. Now, yes, take care of what we own is very important, and I believe taking care of our staff, all our employees, is very important. And we're working on that right now with the wage and benefit survey that's currently going on. And so we'll see what that comes out. You know, we want to attract good employees and we want to keep them. And then, you know, safety is very important. Code, fire, and all that. I think the public safety is a very important thing that the COG can have a big influence on because of those shared services. The fact that we have, you know, a good emergency management program here that's, you know, COG-wide, covers the entire COG, and our fire protection covers most of the COG except for us. However, we're involved in it. It's all, everybody's cooperating. That's very important. And, you know, and again, the social aspect of things, inclusive, healthy, and sustainable community initiatives that do that. I think it's interesting. I think the library takes care of a few things like that with some of the programs that they put on. And so I feel that's very important. Shared services, we got into that a little bit, but yeah, we keep things running efficiently, and you know, the COG's been doing that for us for a long time. but always like to say how much services we leverage because we're involved in this cog. So,
I think
those are my
5 and
comments.
8 go together too, because they apply directly to the resident. Region's efficient shared service. A lot of people don't know the complexity of how our programs operate. Good example is the trash recycling system. Very few people know that that's a whole region-wide program, and it's very inclusive. That gives us a sustainable community.
Bruce, would you like to make any comments on this? And do you have a list of the priorities?
Well, I have seen this. Nigel points out correctly that taking care of what we have, taking care of our staff and public safety go to the top of the list. I mean, that's just, not taking care of what we have is just, is just foolish. And of course, taking care of our staff and public safety are high priorities for all of us. I'm interested in tying things together. The one thing I don't see in here is anything new. This list is more or less what we've been doing. And I think that, last year we had a budget that really tried to do a lot of new things. And that's kind of where we got into trouble, is trying to do too many new things. So I think without naming a specific topic, we ought to go into this next year and identify something new. We want COG to grow and be better than where we have been last year or in the past. And the argument that maybe this is going to cost more money than we traditionally pitched in. But let's not try to be all things to all people. Let's pick one goal for this year that'll make COG better.
Good.
That's
idea.
in a nutshell.
All right, you want to go after me, right? You wanna
Oh, I don't care.
Okay,
I
I'll
don't
go. No, I'll
care.
go next. Okay, I have looked at some things on this, and what's being said is what we want to hear. I think it's when we were talking at executive is kind of the input we wanted back. But I'm going to give an example, and I think to Eric's point that this would be looking at new project, because obviously, for example, take care of what we own. All right, we have to do certain things to keep the buildings open. There's certain parts of that maintenance program we have to do. But for example, one of the things that is on the list that always gets put to the back is funding depreciation. Okay, how much money do we want to put aside so that when the building needs a new roof, we don't have to go out and get a loan because we've put money aside to do that. We've funded the depreciation of that building. So this is something the facilities committee has been working on, is how do we come up with numbers of what we need to fund depreciation? And they're not small numbers. But when it comes to the percentage of the budget, they're less than 3% of the budget. Well, who's sitting around wants to take 3% every year that they could buy a new whatever? Is that more important than putting a new benefit in for the staff? That's what we're trying to address here. This year, what's more important? Is it more important that we're losing staff, so we have to put some more money there this year? Or is it that our buildings, we're running behind on our depreciation that we want for the buildings? Do we need to pick that up? So I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. And I look at this as the annual process. I think this year, maybe we look at, hey, it's buildings this year. Next year, it might be staff or EMS. We learned right down here at Jack's Mills that we have a great safety and fire program in this area, and by golly, we got to keep it up. That is a very important number. So everything on here, and I agree kind of with what Bruce says, but I want to tie that into that the new stuff that people want to do is what we need to prioritize in this list. So if there's 10 new things, is it a facilities and we identified that number one, or is it emergency services and we identified that as number 1 or 2? I think that's what we're looking at, but I think the discussion we're having here goes a long way to help make those decisions. And I think that's kind of what we wanted to hear tonight. So I want to thank everybody. And Bud, you're up.
Well, I agree with everybody.
Okay,
How's
Bud
that
agrees
work?
with everybody.
Well, here's a little bit of a different take on this. Yes, these should be our guidance. This should be our conscience. All of these things, and we can prioritize them. But we have to take care of infrastructure. But I want to go back to why we have a COG, and we have a council. Why we do this is to provide services that we share. Everybody can share of. We have a share of it, and we can provide our citizens with all of this. Right now, there are 26 budgetary things in 5 different agencies right now. And, well, for instance, for the Parks Directors, the pools, the aquatics, everything else. But to me, we have to find out how we can provide that service to our citizens, how we can give them a quality library, a quality Parks and Rec program, quality aquatics program, and all the things that we stand for. But yes, we have to take care of the infrastructure too. So whenever I look at a budget, I know I'm not a bean counter. We need to leave this up to our bean counters, which we have a whole quadri of them in the COG. And our part is to say, okay, are we doing a right job for our citizens with our library, with our Parks and Rec, with our sewer, with our refuge collection, with our aquatics? And that to me should be what we should really look at. And I agree with Bruce and what everybody said. These things have to fall within that. But we have to get our eye on the bigger picture is, are we giving our citizens for the bang for their buck or whatever it is for all the regional parks? Expensive. We know that. But they are probably going to be the goal, the lifeblood of our community. Everybody wants parks. Talk about quality of life. Everything around here to me is quality of life because we're at University of Town. We're all making a decent, well, I didn't used to. We're all making a decent living. We all can live here in a bubble. But our goal is to be citizens of Harris Township, our little budget, we can provide the best service we can. And all these other things should fall in line. There's no doubt about it. And it costs money. I mean, I'm probably the one that the cheapest one here as far as budget goes, but funds and everything else. But we have to be. It costs money to provide good services to our community, and we have a great community. And I guess I'm rattling on a little bit, but I look at the big picture. And all these things should fall into the bean counter should take care of that. Frank on the facilities, what you're saying is right. You should do that. What you say should. Bruce on parks, you should make sure parks are good for everybody. So it's more than just what priority for this. Take care of our people. Are we giving the best bang for the buck on library, Parks and Rec, the whole thing, planning commission, everything? And I think we're doing a good job. And we got to realize we've already had a projection that we're the minimum increase in our budget's going to be 7 or 8% next year, just for attrition, everything, attrition. So be prepared. That's all I got to say.
All right. Anything?
Let me react to Bruce's comment.
Sure.
Give you an example of what a new idea is. It's probably the end of 2023-24. We're going to do a model organic composting program out of the authority, probably a neighborhood of about 700 homes in Park Forest. There seems to be a strong interest in doing it, so we're going to model it. It's eventually going to be part of the UAJA organic composting program, the digester they're building. So, in terms of something new, that's something that may be coming down the road, because fits within the refuge recycling, but another addition of something we aren't doing.
And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do with this is where is that on a priority? Is that higher than a new pool liner or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of what we're saying here. How do we come up with? And this is more of what's the process going to be? Here we're going to give all these things and we have all these categories, but what's the process at the end of the day? How do we determine which one's number 1, 2, 3? And like Bud says, which one do we have to do, or not rather have to, but even though it might be priority 3 and we were only going to do 1 and 2, we may have to include 3 because to keep up the quality of life. So like I said, we're trying to put a system together more than anything.
And organics in our strategic planning, from the authority, came in real high. People are interested in doing it, so we're gonna do it on a small scale and see what happens.
So, to let you, we've had our say, now do you have any questions for us or any comments you'd like to make that, that you might want to take back or have on this?
I'd like to make a couple of observations. One is, I do think there's likely to be some initiatives or projects that may touch on several of these areas, 2 or 3, for example. One of the ones that I think you're familiar with that is being explored this year, and we're going to be discussing more over the course of the year, has to do with the infrastructure planning with the bipartisan infrastructure bill. That's going to require additional resources in order for the COG and the MPO to have the technical expertise, whether it's staff in-house or consultants, but that can hopefully leverage bringing in more federal funding for road projects that will result in safety improvements, hopefully improved access and transportation benefits that could contribute to the economic vitality of the region. And that will really be one of our key partnerships with the county and other municipalities in the region, as well as across the county. So there are initiatives like that may touch on several of these areas, and that's an example of something new that will hopefully have some payoff over the next few years. But as was noted, I think this will be a year that budgets are going to be tight, still given the inflation, given other constraints. So we want to make sure we're aligning projects that are going to have important bang for the buck and benefits to the region, but also support partnerships and collaboration within the agencies and within the COG broadly, even with the municipalities, so that we are doing what we can to benefit the residents and the communities, but also do it as efficiently and cost effectively as possible. That's how this list was created, and it sounds like we're hitting the mark based on the conversation. And if you feel like ranking these in any particular order, that would be potentially helpful, or just let us know we're on the right track.
Well, I think one of the things that we talked about at the executive committee was the Survey Monkey. We talked about that as after all the townships had a chance to discuss it, to maybe put a Survey Monkey out with these on it, and each of us would have an opportunity to rate them 1 through 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, how many there are. So, and then when they came back, they would actually compile them and said, okay, number 3 got the most hits, and they could compile a list and put them up where most of the things. So if you guys are comfortable with that, I think we would be in favor of doing that, to rank them instead of sitting here trying to figure out which ones we want and which ones another group wants. But
I would add, if we do that, give us the option of combining things that sort of follow the same theme, like 1 to 7. I don't know how Survey Monkey operates technically to do that, but if it can be done, it would be useful to think about that option.
all right. Anybody have anything else they want to comment?
I have a little bit of different take on that also. I would like to see a survey, or not a survey, or public opinion saying, okay, look, the Millbrook Marsh is very important. We're going to spend more money on that. Our regional parks, we're finishing up phase 1 of our regional parks, maybe this summer. And then maybe are we going to enter into phase 2? Mm-hmm. And that's going to, how do we do that? How are we going to do our aquatics programs? We upgrade our pools. We can spend money on that more. And I'm not trying to make it any more important than these bullets right here, but those are the things that we need to think about, because it's capital outlay. I think we need to develop a CIP for 20 years out and say, okay, Millbrook Marsh, I never thought in my wildest dreams that would become as important or as popular or as
expensive,
valuable as it is. I just figured it was a swamp. You were going to walk there and get your feet wet. But which we used to do that. And the same with our aquatics program. Never thought that our aquatics program would be, the demand would grow so much that we have more than just a swimming pool, we have parks. when we need to spend money on that. Library is more of a community center than a library. And there's ways to work, but of course, that is always, the library budget, we'll fight over that later. But are we willing to do that? Those are the type of things I also think need to be on there. We probably should prioritize all these too, but we need to say, where are we spending our money? Where are we spending it? And that would be a CIP that would go out 15 or 20 years. Yeah. You can't do it all at once. You can't do all we want to do. Millbrook Marsh, for millions of dollars there, right? We need millions of dollars for there. For our 3 regional parks for the second phase, boy, how much money? Put bathrooms at Hess Park. That's number 1 in the second phase. Those type of things. Library, just expound on these programs, but keep it running smooth. These bullets keep it running smooth, and keep what we've got going. So
I can tell you that CIP 20-year thing, it's in progress. We've been working on it now for
20 years.
7 years at the well, we're starting our 7th year of the facilities committee.
Well,
and we're getting closer and closer to that.
I'm looking at a capital improvement project. Where do we need to offer more amenities and good amenities to our citizens? We have 109,000, something like that now, I think it was. 109,000 residents for Center Region, plus 42,000 graduate students, under 42,000 undergrads, 42,000 grads, assistants. I just think that's as important as, almost as important as our $2 million, $3 million budget right here. So,
well, the interesting issue of Supervisors, the Millbrook Marsh trail system, the new one has to be built. That's sort of an unpleasant surprise to think about the cost of tearing the boardwalk out and putting in a new boardwalk. No one anticipated when the thing was built that it would have to be totally redone. And that's in the millions.
Yeah.
Frank, may I jump in here?
Sure, go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, Bud mentioned a number of things, and I want to point out probably a high priority ought to be hiring someone full-time to do grant writing. For example, the Millbrook Marsh right now and the expansions that are going on there, the municipal contributions are a drop in the bucket for that expansion, for that welcome center and what's ongoing right now. Municipal contributions, I think, are $200,000, and the total project is, several million.
8, I believe.
The pools fund themselves. So we need to look at, rather than just looking at these things and saying, okay, everybody open up your checkbook and let's ask everybody to chip in a little more in taxes. We need to be creative in thinking about how we can attract money from other sources, from federal grants, state grants, private philanthropy, you name it. There's money out there, and we need a full-time person who is dedicated towards going after that kind of funds, those kinds of funds. So I would, I just came and I was listening to Bud talk, but if you want to know my priority list, I'd put that at the top, or very close to the top for this coming year. Let's get someone who can get us some money.
There's a name for that position. It's, what is it? The library had it once. Development person, yeah.
When Eric mentioned about the MPO, and that's exactly the person we're looking for, because the new bill infrastructure, theirs are so complicated. We've tried to look at one, and by the time we figured it out, we were already too late for putting the request in. So we want to get somebody on the MPO. That's all they do. They grant write and they keep track of these bills, so we can identify those things early and be ready to put grants in. So yes, you're right. We need somebody that they're getting more and more prevalent, and they're more and more difficult to do. And yes, you need to have somebody that does grant writing.
And legislative liaison work.
Yeah.
Making sure we keep in touch with
I know, I was agreeing with it. I was helping him along.
Well, the Harrisburg, Washington circle of just other than graduating, knowing how that circle operates, it would end up being a full-time issue for Eric to do that. But
Let me read some more in my book.
No, we don't want you reading any more book. Okay, anybody else have any other comments, anything, any questions?
We lost
Amy?
our audience.
Yeah, we're good to go?
See if they have anything to say.
Anybody there have anything that we've probably gone by with? So anyway, that being said, thank Eric for coming, and if there's nothing else anybody has, I have one thing before we adjourn. March 30th, 6 o'clock will be the next Cato Spring Convention. And we're pushing to get it we're trying to get it right now, and we're just asking right now, is the new Center Hall Fire Company. Trying to have it there. So we haven't got a confirmation. I don't even know if she sent the request down, but that's where we're trying to look at having it.
Nice place. It's been there.
So if nobody has anything else for the good of the order, I'll entertain a.
Can I bring this up, Frank?
Do you want me to read that into the record?
No, I just want to make a comment about it. I want to make a comment.
Go ahead, make your comment.
This hits more to home. There's not much to do with the supervisors, but somebody's been trying to horn in on our Memorial Day, and we're going to try and put a stop to that. The Honorable, whatever his name is, who was the guy? It was Senator John Logan and his role in starting Memorial Day. Well, I have no idea who Senator John Morgan is, but he has listed, he's been 4 years off than what we are. He claims we're asked for a letter of support. We saw the letter of support to help him honor Memorial Day. I don't know who Mr. Major, Senator John Logan was, or what his role in starting Memorial Day was, but he's 4 years off. We celebrate 4 years before he claimed he has, so we're gonna challenge that. We shall see.
We'll see if we accept.
Well, we're dealing with the Honorable William Stevens Dam Building, 1101 Walnut Street in Murfreesboro, Illinois. So we will put the stops to that.
He didn't respond to our letter.
He did not respond to our letter.
We sent him a very nice letter that said, no, thank you.
And we
We're going
invited
to
him
send our battery B over there.
And we invited him to Memorial
Yeah, we
Day.
invited him to come on Memorial Day and told him who the three ladies were that started Memorial Day and corrected his history.
We're going to send our
Nicely
civil
corrected
reenactors
his
on him if he isn't careful.
All right, anything else for the good of the order? Now I hear a motion to adjourn. First, you want to do that from down under?
Sure, move we adjourn.
Is it now happy hour?
It's always happy.
It's
hour.
always.
I knew that's what you were going to say.
That's a 17-hour difference. That would make it